Hey everyone, I'm here in Forsyth County, Georgia, in the city of Cumming, and we're at the grave of someone whose death essentially caused a great migration of blacks in the South, more specifically the town of Cumming, Georgia. That's the grave of Mae Crow. Mae Crow was found unconscious in the woods near Brown's Bridge, and she never regained consciousness and eventually died. It was very easy for prosecutors to blame a certain group of people, more specifically the blacks in Cumming, Georgia. Now there was a small community. Some of you may know it as Oscarville, which is essentially covered by Lake Lanier now. There's a few cemeteries that shows the residents of Oscarville, but those cemeteries are actually surrounded by high-end neighborhoods, and there's actually no access to those small cemeteries. But when Mae Crow was found dead, there was people to be blamed, and one specific person that they blamed was a man named Rob Edwards. Rob Edwards was a young black resident of Cumming, Georgia, and he didn't really have any say in proving his innocence. Eventually, while he was being kept at the Forsyth County Jail, a mob had retrieved him and essentially lynched him, but drug his body behind a wagon, tied him up to, I believe, a telephone pole, and residents of Forsyth County essentially took their turns shooting him and hitting him with rocks after he was long dead. There were two other individuals that were blamed for an attack on a white female, and that was the two teenagers named Oscar Daniel and Ernest Knox. These two were also found to be guilty by an all-white jury on two separate cases within a single day. Now, the judge that presided over this case was Newt Morris, and Newt Morris was the same guy that led the mob that lynched Leo Frank, who we know from the Mary Fagan trial. It's possible that he didn't do it. A lot of people think he did, and a lot of people think he did not do it. In this case, it was very problematic for these three who were lynched so fast without any time to develop a case. It's fairly obvious that they didn't do it. This was the time of Jim Crow, and this was a time of immense racism in the South. This occurred in 1912, by the way, September of 1912. Now, the woman that accused Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel, her name was Ellen Grice. She was alive to blame people for what had happened. That's not the case with Mae Crow. Mae Crow never regained consciousness, so it was essentially other people that took on the case and said, this is the guy that did it. He's the one that raped and killed this 18-year-old girl. These events were fueled by this hysteria of blacks wanting to take over Cumming, Georgia. Rumors were spreading amongst whites that the blacks were going to blow up certain areas of Cumming where whites frequented. After these events occurred, there was a great migration of blacks, specifically out of the South, or out of Cumming, Georgia. Now, the Great Migrations were already occurring. I believe they started in 1910, where many blacks were leaving the South anyhow. But a lot of those were fueled by horrific events of their own being lynched. This led to 1,000 and I believe 98 blacks leaving Cumming, Georgia, or the area of Forsyth County. Their community was essentially Oscarville. After they began leaving, Cumming, Georgia, Forsyth County became an all-white community, completely all-white. And with it being all-white, many people began taking on this narrative of whites only. So Cumming, Georgia became a white-only community, and white-only and proud. This led to Oprah learning about these events and the community of Forsyth County, and in 1987 she came to visit Forsyth County, and she streamed this whole television series. Now at the time, this is in 1987, Oprah was maybe a year into her very famous show, and this essentially really got a lot of viewers. Before we go and look at the grave, it's interesting to note that Rob Edwards was married to the sister of Oscar Daniel, and her name was Jane Daniel, and she gave a testimony at the case in front of Newt Morris for Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel, claiming that they were innocent. This did not work. Fortunately, she was not lynched, but she did eventually leave. But just an interesting note to show that these individuals were related in some sort. But we're going to go over here and take a look at her grave, and just talk about, just give another brief description of what happened to Mae Crow. Now remember, Mae Crow is not the same as Ellen Grice. Mae Crow never regained consciousness, so who's to say that she would have said that he committed this crime? It could have been a white man. Most likely it was not Rob Edwards that did this to her. But we're going to go over here and take a look at her grave and just kind of give a brief description of what happened to her on that day. So follow me. Here we are leading up to the grave of Mae Crow, and it's this very clean white headstone that you'll see over here. It's obviously been restored. The photo on Find a Grave is much different. It's a darker color. It's been cleaned. Possibly a brand new grave. It doesn't look like the same stone, but it definitely is the same markings on here. Her death essentially led to the death of Rob Edwards. Well, not essentially. It did lead to the death of Rob Edwards. Mae Crow was about 18 years old at the time of her death. You can see over here, there in this cemetery, there's quite a few crows buried here. This is her family plot, but you'll see crows on down through here. This is a very small cemetery at a small community church. But Rob Edwards was arrested in September of 1912. He was accused of raping and murdering Miss Mae Crow. She was found unconscious in the woods near Browns Bridge. And if you know Cumming, Georgia, you know that Browns Bridge is a major road in this area. Mae Crow never regained consciousness. so she wasn't able to identify the attackers. The suspects were the closest blacks to the crime. One of them was reportedly to have confessed to the rape and murder of Mae Crow, and he implicated others. Now, you can read a lot about this event in Patrick Phillips' book, Blood at the Root. Patrick's actually a native to Forsyth County. The confession of Ernest Knox in the attack of Ellen Grice was actually coerced by a prominent Cumming resident who mocked and went on to lynch the 16-year-old boy with a rope from a nearby well. In the cases of these individuals, the suspects were taken to the Forsyth County Jail. This is where the lynch mob formed at the Cumming Square, and hundreds of residents formed. The sheriff at the time, Bill Ree, went home and left a single deputy who was his rival in multiple elections. So essentially he is setting him up for failure to hold back the prisoners. It was Deputy Loomis. He tried to hold back the attackers as long as he could before they were able to storm the cell holding Rob Edwards. Now, this is where the large crowd began beating him with crowbars and dragging his body around the town behind a wagon, and then eventually hung his corpse up onto a telegraph pole, and everyone in the crowd took turns shooting into his body. After this happened, not a single person was held accountable for the lynching, despite thousands of witnesses. And we'll just take a quick walk around of the grave of Mae Crow. Now I'm showing you where this grave is, but it's important to remember that Mae Crow was not to blame for his lynching. It was the 1912 judicial system in Forsyth County and vigilantes in Forsyth County at the time. So there's no reason to come and disrespect the grave of Mae Crow. It's in cases where I do visit the graves of other people, I'm very hesitant to even say the name of the cemetery where they're located, but in most cases they're always listed on Find a Grave, so most people don't have a hard time finding it. If they wanted to do something, they definitely could. And that was the grave of Mae Crow, who was found unconscious in the woods here in Forsyth County, Georgia, near Browns Bridge. It's probably one of the most busiest roads in Forsyth County, unfortunately. Super horrific event that happened. In this case, 4 innocent people, or presumably innocent people, died, counting Mae Crow, which would be Ernest Knox, Oscar Daniel, and Rob Edwards. Luckily, Cumming is becoming more diverse. There's a lot of people immigrating, or second generation immigrants in the area, although there's this dark history once you Google Cumming, Georgia. It's unfortunate that Cumming is known for that, but the community is definitely becoming a lot better about how they share this history. If you go into the in front of the courthouse in the Cumming Square, it actually acknowledges what happened during this time, and it's a Georgia historic marker. There's I'd say the soil collections from there's actually soil collections at the Civil Rights Museum, I believe in Birmingham, Alabama, or Montgomery, that shows the site of the lynching, which is a project that they're continuously working on. I definitely recommend you check out that museum if you can, or even their website. They have a really cool photo gallery of everything there. But I encourage you to do some research on this and you know, try to learn more about the community of Cumming. Before I moved here, I didn't know that there was such a dark history after seeing the episode that Oprah Winfrey did, and also just doing some further research on the community. Do some research on your community as well. I'm sure there's dark history in your community. It's kind of interesting to see it. Grandparents, in a lot of cases, know about it. Ask them as well. I'm sure there's a lot of stories that uncover just by having conversations with people that have lived in your community for a really long time. But if you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you want to see the other places that I've been to, click the link in the description and I'll take you to an interactive map. If there's any other place you want to see me document, leave a comment in the comment section. But for now, thanks for watching, everyone.